It was a quiet night, with few people walking the streets at this hour. A man asks his girlfriend if it was here, and she says yes, it was here that she dropped her phone. He asks how she managed to do that and calls her clumsy. She says their little dog suddenly ran off in that direction, so the guy gets the idea to call her phone. The phone rings, and they see it down there in the sewer. The guy finds it disgusting and asks if he really has to do this, but the woman tells him to just grab it. But when he reaches down, he sees something strange. The phone was surrounded by some weird, gross things. They look like frog eggs or something like that. The woman tells him to stop stalling and get her phone out of there, so the guy plunges his arm in and manages to grab the phone, but ends up getting more than that. The woman was playing with their dog when she noticed something was wrong with her boyfriend. She asks what happened, but then quickly realizes something had happened. The guy wasn't saying anything, just staring at something. She asks if he's okay, and the dog also becomes restless. She says he's scaring her, and then the guy finally turns to her and asks what's happening to him, showing her his hand. Then we see his hands infested with these strange things. They seemed to be eating his fingers and burrowing into his bones as they devoured his skin and flesh. These strange eggs grew in size. Soon, the man's entire body was being taken over by these things. He screams desperately for help, but his girlfriend panics, running away with the dog in her arms as fast as she can, screaming for help, until she trips and tumbles down a slope. The dog barks at her as if asking if she's okay, then stops. The woman slowly gets up, seeming to be fine until she realizes it couldn't be true. Those strange eggs were there too. They were everywhere. Today's story, it's called One Day, Suddenly, Seoul is with a school trip. All the kids were going to visit the capital. Our protagonist is there, a bit bored, finding a 2-hour bus ride a bit dull, but it's all good because at least she came along. His crush was on the trip too. He always liked her but never had the courage to say anything. Maybe on this trip they could get closer? Someone interrupts the protagonist's thoughts. It's a weird nerd named Kim Ju who asks why his face is red and if he wants some gum. The protagonist says no, so he goes back to playing Free Fire. A girl sitting ahead gets up and starts calling everyone. She asks who wants to appear in her vlog. The nerd finds it childish, but the rest of the group seems to enjoy it. Then the girl says they're the third-year class of Chunggang High School, and they're going on a trip to the capital. Our protagonist isn't interested in vlogs or anything like that. The only thing that catches his attention is her, his crush, and he wonders what he can do to get closer to her. When they arrive in the capital, they are taken to visit ancient temples that tell the local history and culture. But of course, the kids are more concerned with goofing around and making videos for YouTube. The teacher even tells the girl to stop filming all the time, but she's soon calling the teacher to appear in the vlog too. The protagonist stays there, looking, admiring the capital, amazed at how so many people can fit in such a small space. The teacher announces they'll take a 1-hour break and warns everyone not to get lost. The group is having fun recording vlogs and doing typical teenage things. Our protagonist, on the other hand, is there alone, with his hands crossed like Sasuke Uchiha, just observing everything. He doesn't seem to have much ease blending in with the group. He couldn't be as lively as them, but he wonders if he started vlogging too. Would his crush talk to him? While he's thinking this, someone interrupts him, and it's that nerd, again, saying that from his face he's wondering whether to start vlogging or not and calls him an idiot. He says that introverted people like them can't just enter the extrovert's territory, then starts talking about an anime he's watching. But our protagonist quickly stops paying attention because his crush is appearing in the vlog. From a distance, the protagonist watched as another girl asked if it was her first time in the capital. She said yes and started talking about her childhood, while our protagonist was mesmerized by the girl. She glanced at him, and for a split second, their eyes met. He got all shy and pretended nothing happened, going back to paying attention to the hentai his nerdy friend was talking about. But inside, he wondered if she had really looked at him. Then, 2 guys came over to be in the vlog. One of them introduced himself as Ji-hoon, the class captain and the handsome guy in the room. Our protagonist and his nerdy friend observed them, and the protagonist said he wished he could be like those guys, able to fit in with everyone. Then, as if she had heard that, the YouTuber girl asked who hadn't introduced themselves yet and noticed it was them, of course. She got mad because the guys were watching anime during the school trip, but the nerd wasted no time and introduced himself to the camera. The girl told our protagonist that he was the only one left to introduce himself, and at that moment, we find out his name is Yeon Woo, but I'm going to to call him Lee. He was very nervous, wondering if his crush was watching this. But she was busy chatting with a friend. The YouTuber girl asked if there was any place he wanted to visit on this trip. He thought for a moment but didn't answer. The only place he wanted to be was near her. Well, the trip continued, and the group was having fun, especially the girls. Then the teacher told everyone to gather for a class photo. Everyone said cheese, and there was the photo. The girl with braces noticed something strange approaching. It was pigeons flying towards her. She got scared for a moment, but apparently the pigeons were just doing what pigeons do. The group continued their tour, teasing the girl because, after all, they were just pigeons, right? Then we see one of the pigeons looking at a sewer entrance with blood and feathers, and apparently something else. The curious pigeon approached, thinking it might be food. Then our protagonist heard a strange sound. The pigeon was being eaten alive. Something seemed to be pulling it into the sewer while devouring its flesh. Lee watched this, but just as he began to wonder what was happening, a classmate appeared, class captain, asking why he was alone. Then he said he had a little favor to ask him. Our protagonist followed them, still wondering what he had just seen. Well, it doesn't matter. He must have seen it wrong, but no, he hadn't seen it wrong. Something from within the sewers had really killed that pigeon. Something alive, something disgusting, something hungry, something closer than he could ever imagine. Well, the story continues. On a sunny day, the group arrived at the hotel where they would be staying during the trip. The teacher told everyone to wait a moment and asked the class representative to keep an eye on everyone, while she got the room keys. Meanwhile, the YouTuber girl was filming everything for her vlog. She filmed a girl known for being the top student in the class, who happened to be reading a book. Two classmates came over to disrupt her recording, saying all sorts of nonsense to embarrass the girl. Then she saw our protagonist messing with his phone. He was in the class group chat, looking at the pictures everyone had taken. He started scrolling through the images until he noticed his crush had changed her profile picture. He clicked to see the picture better, and right at that moment, the YouTuber girl showed up, already recording everything. She asked whose picture he was looking at, but the protagonist tried to change the subject. The girl insisted, and he became extremely uncomfortable, trying to say it was just the group photos. She didn't believe him, implying that she knew who he was stalking. But just as she was about to grab his phone, the girl with braces called her, saying there were some people practicing for the talent show, and she needed to film that. The girl went with her but gave the protagonist a look that said, "I haven't forgotten, you know." Our protagonist was in deep trouble, thinking he was screwed now. That girl, Hong Mi, was in all the cliques in the class, and she was going to tell everyone he was a stalker. Someone touched his shoulder. It was the class representative, saying he'd been looking for him. Then he asked if he remembered what he said earlier about that little favor. They went into the bathroom, and the guy looked at the protagonist with a face that said they were about to do something they shouldn't. Then he showed him what was inside his backpack: alcohol. The class representative had brought alcohol on the trip. The protagonist was shocked, but the guy told him to relax because they had also brought some drinks. Then they appeared inside the stall, other students who had also brought alcohol. Apparently, they were planning to have a secret party that night. The guy said he needed someone to carry the backpack for a while, and that if he agreed, he would become a hero to the class, even if they got caught. The protagonist thought for a moment, but then said he was leaving. The guy told him to wait and asked if there was a particular girl he wanted to get to know, and said everyone in the class would be at the party, especially all the girls. And as soon as he said that, the protagonist's crush appeared in his mind, and that was his weak spot. The guy said he would regret missing this opportunity. Lee struggled with himself, saying he wouldn't get involved in this at all, but then we see that he accepted it. There he was, with the backpack full of alcohol. The teacher called everyone to get their room number and key, and she introduced the assistant teacher who would be guiding them. While the guy introduced himself, our protagonist was there, all curled up, praying that no one would notice anything wrong with him. He heard a giggle, and the TikToker classmate was there making fun of him. His nerdy friend showed up, asking why he was so nervous and showing a deck of cards he had bought. He said that even though he was on a school trip, he made his own fun. But the protagonist said he did too, and then showed him his backpack full of alcohol. The nerd couldn't believe it, and let out a loud gasp when he saw the drinks, which immediately caught the attention of the assistant teacher. The guy approached the two boys and asked what the commotion was about, demanding to see what what was in the backpack. Uh-oh. Some time passed, and we see the teacher, unable to believe it, asking Lee if he had lost his mind. He apologized and said that was all he had. The teacher said that when they got back from the trip, she would call his parents for a little talk about this, but for now, he was free to go. The protagonist went to his room, thinking his mom was going to kill him. When he got to the room, he saw the class representative and his friend putting something into some backpacks. The guy noticed his presence and immediately hugged him, making a scene of being worried about him. They said he was a loyal friend, a true hero. Then the protagonist saw more alcohol in his backpack and asked if they were going to the party now. The guy was at a loss for words and then told our protagonist that he must be really tired, that they hadn't decided where they were going yet, and that he should stay there and they would call him when they found a cool place. Lee stayed there, unsure of what to say, and just accepted it. Later that night, his nerdy friend was engrossed in Free Fire while he was there, all anxious, checking his phone every 10 seconds. He had already realized that the guy had ditched him, but the worst part wasn't even being tricked. It was knowing that his crush was going to be there. This made him spend the whole night cursing the guy and feeling like crap. The next day arrived, and today they were going to see the Namsan cable car. Everyone was excited. The YouTuber was already there filming her vlogs. Even the nerd was pumped, talking about how the distance from one end to the other, divided by speed, would take approximately 3 minutes inside the cable car. But our protagonist didn't care. He just pretended to listen. He was mentally shattered, wondering how the party had gone last night, if his crush had hooked up with someone. Well, whatever. In the end, all he wanted was to be part of their clique. His nerdy friend decided to tease him by telling everyone that he was a country bumpkin who had never ridden a cable car in his life. But to his surprise, his crush, So Yeon, thought it was cool and said it was her first time on a cable car too. The protagonist was about to respond to her, but a classmate interrupted, asking if it was true that he got caught with alcohol yesterday. So Yeon was impressed and said he was amazing, asking if he wasn't scared at the time. The protagonist got all giddy from the compliment, and just as he was about to respond, the cable car operators called for them to start the ride, so his crush left with her friend. On the cable car, the view was incredible. Everyone was amazed at the height of the thing, except for our protagonist, who kept thinking only about her and how he could get closer to his crush. Everyone was taking photos and recording with their smartphones until the girl with braces received an alert message from the Central Security and Disaster Countermeasures. It said that an unidentified virus had been found in all parts of the capital. Before she could finish reading the message, a bird slammed into the cable car window. The creature, which had a strange appearance, stuck to the glass with its eyes wide open. Other pigeons began slamming into the window. The impact was so violent that their bodies shattered into pieces, leaving blood and something strange dripping down the glass. The kids didn't understand what was happening, but it was too late now. The cable car had been overtaken. The pigeon's body stuck to the glass started moving and writhing in a grotesque manner, as if it were gradually growing and transforming into something else. Everyone was still confused about what that disgusting thing was. Our protagonist looked at it closely and wondered if they were frog eggs or something like that. Then the crack in the glass began to widen, and some strange liquid started to seep through. Everyone backed away, and this strange liquid dripped onto the floor. It really looked like some kind of fish or frog eggs. It was hard to tell. Everyone backed away even more from that disgusting thing. People were already pushing each other to the back of the cable car. Our protagonist stepped on someone's foot, and he froze when he saw that he had stepped on his crush's foot. He immediately apologized, but she said it was nothing. The pushing continued, and the two of them were squeezed at the back of the cable car. Someone yelled at them to stop. It was the teacher, saying that if they kept going, she was going to die. And then a cheeky student told everyone to push even harder. The redhead was about to curse, but then he noticed his classmate acting strangely. He asked what the guy was doing, and the boy was looking more closely at that thing. He said that if they looked closer too, they would notice that thing was moving. At that moment, the cable car finally reached the disembarkation point. The operators were wondering what the hell that thing stuck to the outside was. They apologized for the inconvenience and asked the students to disembark carefully. People started exiting the cable car immediately. seeing that disgusting thing on the outside spreading more and more, as if it were something alive. Inside, those who stayed made a line to leave. The YouTuber continued filming everything, while Lee, our protagonist, was thinking about, guess what? Whether now was a good time to talk to his crush. He thought he'd been acting like an idiot up until now, and maybe there wouldn't be another chance to be so close to her. So he called out to the girl and apologized again for stepping on her foot. The girl said it was fine. He had already apologized for that. He got even more nervous and started babbling nonsense about the pigeons and the cable car, sounding even more idiotic than usual. The girl didn't understand anything and asked if he wanted to say something to her. Then she looked him in the eyes, waiting for an answer. When our protagonist finally gathered the courage, just as he was about to invite her to go with him to the observatory, a scream caught their attention. He turned around and saw that the girl with braces had fallen to the ground. Apparently, when she was getting off the cable car, one of those strange eggs had burst and spread everywhere, and some of it had landed on her leg. She didn't notice at first, but when they told her and she realized, she let out an even louder scream because those disgusting things were burrowing into her leg, eating her skin. She panicked and started hitting her leg to try to get rid of the thing, while everyone else backed away. Going down the stairs, another girl fell to the ground. She struggled to get up, and at that moment, everyone noticed that some of that disgusting stuff was stuck to her face. One of the cable car operators asked the girl with braces if she was okay, and she immediately turned to him in desperation, begging for help. She grabbed his arm and said something was wrong with her, but at that moment, those disgusting things started spreading to the guy too. He backed away from the girl in terror, but it was too late. His arm had already been completely taken over by that strange thing. The redhead, who was next to leave, told everyone to stay inside the cable car, and then he and his friend began to close the door. The nerd, who until now had been wearing headphones and not paying much attention to real life, asked what was happening. The influencer asked the redhead why he did that, and then she noticed her friend lying on the ground, writhing and screaming for help. At that moment, she feels the urge to help her, but the redhead stops her, asking if she can't see that disgusting thing everywhere. He tells her to take a good look at her friend. Those things are devouring her. Lee watches this bizarre scene in silence until what seemed bad becomes even worse when a hand touches the glass. Everyone stops talking and looks in disbelief. The girl outside is begging for help, crying, saying it hurts too much, while her body starts to deform. Everyone in the cable car lets out a scream of terror at the same time, backing away as much as possible from the bizarre scene. Lee can't believe this is really happening. The girl's body was transforming. Those eggs that stuck to her were growing more and more until she was unrecognizable. At the observatory entrance, everything seemed normal. We see the teacher talking to a staff member about a reservation for 25 students, but suddenly her conversation is interrupted by screams. A crowd of desperate young people was running and screaming as if fleeing from something. The teacher doesn't understand anything and asks where they are going. Then she sees it. A girl was lying on the ground, trembling. She runs to the girl and asks what happened. Then she sees it, her face completely deformed, monstrous. The girl begs for help, saying it hurts too much. Teacher is in complete shock, but before she can react, it's already too late. Inside the cable car, everyone was squeezed together, terrified in a corner. Our protagonist sees his crush, who also seemed terrified. In fact, she was trembling with fear, but just as he was about to respond, everyone's phones start ringing at the same time. An emergency message saying that a mysterious virus had been found in several parts of the capital and to take caution. Outside the cable car, there was panic, screams, and confusion. People were running down the stairs, fleeing from something. Another young person had their body taken over by the virus, becoming completely deformed. The people inside the cable car watched everything, and apparently this was happening all over the city. They wonder what to do. One starts crying, another says he's going to call his mom, but the redhead notices something. He shouts to alert his friends. The girl outside had stood up and was standing still like Samara at the door. The group starts talking to her, asking if she's okay, but the girl remained silent. They tell our protagonist to talk to the girl since he's closest, but he doesn't want to, at least not until he sees his crush beside him, how scared she is, almost crying. Then he realizes it's a good opportunity to prove himself to her and decides to try to talk to Samara. He approaches slowly and tries to speak to her, but the girl is just standing there, silent. He calls her name, asks if she's okay, The others tell him to speak louder. He gathers his courage and gets even closer, thinking how terrifying she looks. He calls her name again, louder this time, but then something happens. Everyone's phones start ringing again, including the protagonist's. It was another disaster alert. As he goes to read it, Samara begins to make strange noises. Her eyes are completely white, and she seems to have lost consciousness. He calls her name one more time, but a scream from outside seems to wake the girl. People were approaching, a group of 3 climbing the stairs toward the cable car. They stop when they see her. The bizarre scene of the girl, completely deformed, standing there in front of them. She emits a grotesque sound. The strongest guy even tries to ask what's happening, but the girl, if you can still call her that, lunges at them. Tentacle-like things shoot out from her face and attack the bigger guy. The guy doesn't react. That grotesque mass falls on him, and everyone is horrified by the scene. He tries to defend himself, but it's too late. The thing had already attached to his skin. His friend asks if he's okay, and he just tells the kid to hurry up and get out of there, that he'll hold this thing off. That thing pulls him upward. He feels as if the skin on his face is tearing. It's as if this horrifying creature is absorbing the guy. Inside the cable car, the panicked teenagers wonder if they should help the guy, but what can they do? Our protagonist, on his knees, completely in shock, watches this bizarre scene. He can't believe what he's seeing. In a survival impulse, he locks the cable car door from the inside. His friends see it, but no one says anything. He tells them it's better to lock the door because if she gets in, it's over for them. When he says this, one of the people who stayed outside throws himself against the cable car with all his strength. He begs them to open the door, screams even louder when he realizes that the creature is coming straight for him. Inside the cable car, no one does anything to help. They all watch as the creature throws itself on him and starts devouring him, blood spraying everywhere. The guy screams desperately for help, but there's no way to help him now. Death had come for him. The creature then looks inside the cable car and lets out a horrifying scream. The kids inside are all huddled together in shock. The kid with glasses puts his hands on his head, shouting, "What the hell is this?" Then the redhead covers his mouth. Apparently, the growling had stopped. The creature was gone. The redhead tells him to stay quiet so as not to attract it back. The girls are crying, and one of them says it's all their fault. Because of them. That guy. They could have saved him. The protagonist doesn't say anything, just watches her in silence, but the redhead gets angry, asking what the hell she's talking about. Did she want him to open the door? Didn't she see what just happened? If the protagonist hadn't locked the door, everyone in there would have died. The nerd can't say anything. He's just trembling all over. But suddenly, he decides to act. He gets up and starts opening the hatch on top of the cable car. The others start yelling and asking what he's doing, and he says he's getting out of there. And if that thing comes back, it's not here now, so they have to take the chance. The redhead says they won't be able to escape it. Meanwhile, the protagonist doesn't know what to think. He looks at his crush, who was also trembling. He keeps staring at her until the girl notices and asks if he has something to say to her. Why is he looking at her like that? Then nervously, he says no. He just wanted to know if she's okay. The girl finds it strange and says she's fine. He can stop staring at her now. And he says, "Oh, okay, sorry." Then she curls up in a fetal position, just like my parents did after they found out I was making manhwa videos. The redhead then tells the nerd to listen to him. They shouldn't leave. It's too dangerous. If they go out, they'll die. Velma from Scooby-Doo says all they can do is stay there and wait for rescue. Then she tells the redhead to stop telling them what to do. He doesn't have the right to say anything. He asks, "What?" And she asks him how much longer he's going to keep running from this. He didn't help that girl, and instead, he ran away. "It's all because of you," she says. The guy gets up, furious, asking what the hell is wrong with her. Meanwhile, the nerd tells him to calm down, but he keeps asking why she's blaming him. "Am I wrong?" she asks. Not only did he run, but he also stopped them from helping her. He closed the door when he realized it would only help him. We didn't ask you to do that. It's all your fault." The redhead gets even angrier and starts to confront her, saying that what he did was the best for everyone. They are going through this together, so there's no reason for her to blame him. The YouTuber asks them to stop. The boy continues, saying that Velma acts all nice but is actually useless. She won't do anything to help. Then the YouTuber screams for him to stop, please. He does. But when he looks at Velma, he sees that she's in complete shock, crying and trembling. Then he says, "I can't believe this. She's the one who started it." it. But at that moment, something nearly scares the crap out of them. It's the cable car's communicator, with someone asking if there's anyone on the other end. Someone, just now, cable car. Everyone stays silent, listening, but the message is full of static, and they can only understand a few words. This is the control room, they managed to make out. Well guys, even though it was slow, the cable car was moving again. The redhead sits down and says, "Ah, thank God I'm alive." The YouTuber continues sending messages in the WhatsApp group, but no one replies. What the hell, she says. No one's responding. What do I do? Meanwhile, our protagonist is there, completely frozen. He's still staring at his crush like a maniac. The girl has her hands on her face, crying uncontrollably, apologizing to the girl they let die. The YouTuber hugs her to try to comfort her while she asks if the others will be okay. But the redhead says they don't have time to worry about others. The truth is, they don't even know what's going on down there. They'll have to be careful when they get there. He's going straight home. But at that moment, they hear a loud noise. The cable car stops. They're stuck up there. What's going on? Someone asks. Why did it stop suddenly? The nerd grabs the communicator and starts asking for help, saying the cable car is stuck. Then another loud noise. The cable car starts moving again. It's slow, but at least it's moving. They can already see the building. They're almost there. As the cable car gets closer, they start to see the chaos on the ground. They all nearly wet their pants when they see that a massacre has occurred. Bizarre bodies are scattered everywhere in a horrific scene. The cable car gets closer, and the kids can see that something is waiting for them at the end of the line. Finally, cable car arrives at its destination after a lot of shaking, throwing everyone around. Is everyone okay? The redhead asks. This place is a real hell. Velma asks if they're trapped in the cable car, and the redhead responds, "Can't you see, you bitch?" Then our protagonist's crush sees something at the other end of the cable car. It's moving. It's another one of those disgusting creatures. She warns everyone, and they immediately turn around. The creature places a hand on the glass, catching our protagonist by surprise. Then it lets out a horrifying growl, and then, my friends, it starts breaking the glass and entering the cable car. The kids watch in shock as that disgusting thing enters where they are, like a scene from a horror movie. Everyone panics and starts screaming. The creature fully enters the cable car, emitting strange noises. Then the redhead decides to act. He kicks one of the windows with all his strength, but only manages to crack it. The creature is already starting to gather itself again into one mass as they take turns trying to break that damn window. Then the monster lets out a terrifying scream, causing the redhead to panic and go at the window with everything he's got again. This time it works. The glass shatters, opening a way for everyone to escape the cable car in desperation. They start running just in time to avoid being devoured by that thing. Our protagonist notices that his crush has tripped and ended up falling behind, so he stops and extends his hand to her. The girl takes a moment to react, so he grabs her arm and tells her to run. The creature was already emerging from the cable car and starting to chase them. The redhead is already ahead, running down the stairs. They descend several flights, running as fast as they can. But when the redhead thinks he's safe, he sees something that makes his blood run cold. A true horror movie scene, full of guts and blood scattered everywhere, along with those strange things. He immediately shouts for everyone to stop and starts wondering what the hell they should do. Other creatures that were there begin to notice their presence, causing the nerd to wet himself. Our protagonist is still running down the stairs, holding his crush's arm. They're both out of breath until the girl tells him to wait a moment. He asks what's wrong, and then sees that her knee is all banged up. Immediately, like a good beta virgin, he apologizes and asks if it was his fault. She says no, it happened when they were leaving the cable car. He says, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And she looks into his eyes and says, "Thank you for helping me," which makes his heart race faster than any monstrous creature could. But we don't have time for romance, my friends. They hear another scream, but this time it's human. It's that weird, nerdy guy running up the stairs. Behind him, the redhead is saying he's going to kill him. Something happened. The protagonist asks what's going on, and the redhead responds that they can't go to the ground floor. It's a complete hell. The other nerd says those monsters are down there too. It's full of them. So they start looking for another place to take shelter. They reach the second floor, which initially seems to be free of those things. They're cautious but decide to go through there. Meanwhile, the creature that was chasing them had lost their trail until it notices drops of blood leading in a direction, and then it lets out a disgusting growl. The kids kids are now on what must be the first floor. Velma is still crying, asking for her mother, saying that no one is answering the phone and that she's scared. The nerd says that everyone online is talking about these things, but the redhead tells him to call emergency services. Why aren't they answering? The nerd seems to have seen something. He starts approaching the window and then looks outside, seeing that things weren't looking good out there either. Meanwhile, our protagonist is talking to his mom, telling her he's in the Seoul cable car and can't get out because he's stuck on the second floor. His mom says that she and his dad just left the house and that he should stay where he is and be careful, okay? At that moment, he sees the girls tending to his crush's wound and completely forgets who he was talking to. He was about to start staring at the girl again when the weird kid asks if he has any money. The protagonist doesn't understand, but then sees that the boy wanted a soda. The nerd asks if he wants something too, but he says he's good, then asks the nerd if he's okay. The boy puts his hands on his head and says, "Am I okay? How can I be okay? I shouldn't have come on this trip. I should be at home playing GTA 5 online. I shouldn't have come." Our protagonist thought the same as his friend, that he shouldn't have come either. For a moment, he was sure he was going to die. But even so, he managed to help his crush. She even thanked him. Was it worth it? At that moment, he notices something he hadn't seen before. Red spots on the floor. He gets closer and sees that it's blood. It's his crush's blood. He starts following the trail of blood, thinking, "Poor girl, she bled all the way here." And then, my friends, he sees a disgusting slime. The protagonist stops for a second, but it's too late. He hears that horrifying growl again. That bizarre creature is right in front of him, ready to devour him alive. We've reached the end of another video, my friends. If you're enjoying the story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notified when the next part is out. Remember, if you want to support the channel to bring more and more videos, you can become an official member of the channel for just $5. Thanks for watching this far. See ya!